Coming up on Soul of the South News, these young men speak their minds about race and respect.
It's about who we are. We are black. I think we are targeted more than any other race because of that.
They open up to Soul of the South News and share their thoughts about life after the death of Trayvon Martin. Intercepted messages posing a strong, credible threat forces the evacuation of hundreds of Americans from Yemen. Former President George W. Bush is recovering from a medical procedure that millions of Americans undergo every year.
Here's a question. If you burned yourself, would you apply butter to the burn? Coming up, we'll introduce you to a doctor who started a website to dispel that myth and many others.
This is Soul of the South News.
Hundreds of thousands of protesters continue to demand justice for Trayvon Martin, the 17-year-old African-American shot and killed in a Sanford, Florida neighborhood in February of 2012. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Soul of the South News. I'm Roy Hobbs. Martin's killer, 29-year-old George Zimmerman, was found not guilty of second-degree murder and manslaughter 3 weeks ago. Coast to coast, protesters are calling for federal charges in the racially tinged case. They are also marching to end racial profiling that they say was at the heart of the case. Now, some wonder, though, if these protests can turn into a sustained movement for racial justice and change the way African Americans, especially young men, are viewed now and in the future. Soul of the South's Jim Scott has the story of 3 teens who have very strong opinions on this issue.
I am strong and I can be just as well as anybody in any other race. That we have the same potential as anybody else.
You shouldn't be defined by the color of your skin.
Don't look at me as a black man. Look at me as the human race first. That's the first race that we all should look at ourselves at. We are first human before we get into our natural race. Because when you understand that you are human, you will understand. You will come to acknowledgement that your race doesn't affect your ability to do anything.
14-year-old Spencer McElway, 18-year-old Rasheen McJunkins, and 20-year-old Dan Baylock all believe that George Zimmerman targeted Trayvon Martin because he was African American. Zimmerman, upset over recent break-ins, saw Martin walking around the neighborhood alone on a rainy evening and called 911. He told the dispatcher that Martin was acting strangely and called him suspicious. What Zimmerman didn't know was that Martin was walking back from a convenience store to his father's fiance's house. Zimmerman told the dispatcher Martin, quote, looked black, and then said, they always get away. Zimmerman confronted Martin. The two fought, and Zimmerman shot Martin once in the chest, killing him.
It can happen to any one of us. We are just like Trayvon Martin. We could walk down the street with our hoods on or with sagging pants or something like that, and we can get killed just like he did. But it's about who we are. We are black. I think we are targeted more than any other race because of that.
Zimmerman claims he shot Martin in self-defense, but Dan says he believes Martin had a right to fight back.
And I think he was just being a typical child, and that's what children do. He was scared. He didn't know what to expect.
Dan says he understands even more about why Martin may have been caught off guard by Zimmerman's actions. He says he was in a car headed to his sister's gymnastics practice when he was pulled over by police. He says the officers drew their guns, pointed them towards his window, and ordered him out of the car.
A black man had recently robbed a bank, and with the description that I had, the red hoodie and everything, and they thought it was me.
It wasn't him. But Rasheen feels that kind of discrimination doesn't come unwarranted.
I believe we are discriminated against, but I also believe that sometimes we put ourselves in a discrimination process about how we carry ourselves. How do we go out and we approach people? How do we approach a job? Sagging pants and this slang talk.
Dr. John Miller is Associate Professor of Social Work at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. He says he's concerned about the images young African-American males are seeing.
Are there images that are reinforcing negative stereotypes? Or are there images that are giving them a certain belief, a certain self-importance, where they believe that they actually can do well?
One thing the Trayvon Martin case did was highlight trauma.
Previous trauma that many African Americans have experienced, and when you have that trauma highlighted, it just makes the injustices of the past feel like they just happened yesterday. And so I think that's one of the things that's most, and I don't look at it all negatively. I think that's an unfortunate thing because as an African American man myself, I did have a feeling of, oh my goodness, here we go again. However, I'm an optimist, and so I believe the only way we're going to address these problems is to actually go on and tackle it.
Miller says African Americans have challenges and obstacles, but he feels they also have opportunities. He believes that drawing on the past as a strength gives more hope for a brighter future.
Our young people need hope, our young people need mentoring, and our young people need improved education. I think all of these things work together. They're not mutually exclusive. They all need to work together.
He says in order to stand up to injustices, young African Americans need to start making changes now. He encourages them to talk to someone of a different race, be uncomfortable, and have real conversations. He hopes the Justice for Trayvon Martin movement is strong enough that people will start to take action.
It's my hope, and once again, this is my optimism taking over, but it is my hope that with everything involving this case, from the reaction to the feelings of how people feel, to now hearing the jurors come out and talk about different things afterwards, I really hope that this is a real moment and not just something from my Facebook wall.
You can't stop at protesting. You got to go beyond protesting. Like if you just protest, okay, that's all fine and good, but you got to go to the next level. You can't just protest, oh, okay, we protested, that's fine and good, but now what's next? I think you got to have something to back up the protest.
Trayvon Martin was one of us, and the fact that it could be any other young man walking the streets, I think it can turn into a movement like that, because we aren't just going to sit here and let one of us, a fellow member of our race, die. We're going to have to stop it at least one of these times. We can't stop. We got to keep moving. And
Jim Scott, Soul of the South News.
Professor John Miller says, as parents, one thing you can do to encourage your children is just talk to them, regardless of how you feel about the case. It's important to talk to your kids and let them know you are there to listen to them. Now, Zimmerman's acquittal sparked a national debate over self-defense laws. After a push from Trayvon Martin's parents and other African-American leaders, the Stand Your Ground law will be reviewed by Florida lawmakers this fall. However, a Quinnipiac University poll suggests that it could be an uphill battle. Out of 1,400 registered voters, 3/4 of Republicans support the law, while 6 in 10 Democrats oppose them. In households with gun owners, voters backed the laws by a margin of 67% to 29%. And coming up next on Soul of the South News.
I'm Vicki Newton. Have you been online lately searching for some medical information? If so, we have a new website for you.
And President Bill Clinton and daughter Chelsea on a mission in South Africa.
I hear my grandmother's voice in my head every day, that life is not about what happens to you.
You are watching Soul of the South News.
The internet is becoming the doctor who makes house calls, and now there is a health website designed just for African Americans. Soul of the South's Vicki Newton is here with more details.
Roy, Dr. Corey Hebert is becoming one of the most well-known doctors in America. He's been on Oprah, he's friends with Dr. Oz, and now he has his own media platform, blackhealthtv.com.
We got to break that whole concept of go when you're sick. We want to go when we're well. Go when you're well.
Dr. Corey Hebert is a man with a mission to help educate African Americans about living healthy lives.
Almost every black woman that I know over the age of 40 has fibroids.
He started a website that focuses on the health of African Americans after he heard some of his friends dispensing some misinformation about the best way to treat a burn.
And the first thing he said was, oh man, I need to get some butter to put on this burn. And so I said, hey, as a joke, right, you shouldn't put butter on a burn. That's the worst thing you could ever put on a burn. And he was like, come on, man, I've been doing this for a long time. I need to get some butter to put on this burn. So I said, I'm serious. You really should not do that. And everybody at the table, there were 10 PhDs, Ivy League people, you know, they all agreed that you're supposed to put butter on the burn.
The website is blackhealthtv.com, which is designed to reach an audience that historically has been skeptical of the medical community.
I think we tend to shy away from doctors and physicians and medical information because we've been so disenfranchised, and the medical community has done some interesting, horrible things to the African American community over time. You can bring up things like the Tuskegee experiment and lots of other things where black people tend to be wary of the medical profession.
Dr. Hebert's interest in medicine started at the doctor's office when he was a small boy.
I knew I was going to be a doctor when I was 5 years old. I never thought about anything else because I actually had a very traumatic medical situation happen to me when I was 5. I got bitten by a dog in the face.
He went to Morehouse College, Meharry Medical School, and did his residency at Tulane. Now he's CEO of Black Health TV, housed at Dillard University, and he's concerned about the health of his community.
We tend to have this folklore and these wives' tales that actually go through our community and become fact. And so, unless you're in the medical field, you don't actually really delve into these subtle nuances, so you just continue to perpetuate all these myths in the African American and minority communities, and these things have to be dispelled, and that's my job, to dispel them.
He says the videos on Black Health TV make it a more useful site than other health sites like WebMD. Dr. Hebert says Black Health TV adds 14 new videos a month featuring the latest health news, and there are recipes as well, along with other health tips.
Let's make one. It's right there. It tells you how to do it. And I'm really happy that I now, with blackhealthtv.com, I can touch every person in the world with this because of the web, so that they can actually have the information they need so that they can be as healthy as they deserve to be. Black people shouldn't just have this, they deserve this.
For Soul of the South News, I'm Vicki Newton.
Black Health TV is associated with Morehouse Medical School and Harvard. If you would like to visit the site, just go to www.blackhealthtv.com. When Soul of the South continues, the worst drought in one African nation.
There is shortage of water for animals as well as for human beings.
Has thousands of women and children facing severe hardships.
Soul of the South News. This is Hope.
Former President George W. Bush is in high spirits and ready to go home from the hospital. The 43rd president had a stent placed in an artery this morning just one day after a blockage was discovered. Doctors in Texas say the operation was successful and Mr. Bush should be going home tomorrow. Mr. Bush is 67 years old. He's known to have good health, and he encouraged everyone to get regular checkups. Former President Bill Clinton and his daughter Chelsea are meeting with South Africa's president today. Their discussions with President Jacob Zuma include education, impending investments, and labor relations. Chelsea Clinton says she's grateful for the work she's able to do through the Clinton Foundation.
I know that I'm making a difference. I never want to have a wasted day. I want to be able to wake up every day and kind of think about how I can best be of service. And, you know, for now, that's this.
The father and daughter Clintons are on a 9-day tour of Africa. They are visiting cities where the Clinton Foundation is working to improve conditions. The threat of terrorist attacks and civil unrest has the State Department warning all Americans to leave Yemen now. They've ordered all non-emergency U.S. government personnel to leave as well. Now, Yemen has been under a heightened security alert since U.S. officials intercepted a message from al-Qaeda leaders telling operatives in Yemen to do something. Florida's Republican Governor Rick Scott will try again to purge his state's voter rolls. Critics say it's an attempt to intimidate and keep minorities from casting votes. Scott, who is preparing to run for re-election next year, has repeatedly said the aim of any purge is to protect the integrity of the voter polls. But advocacy groups call the review of non-citizens a thinly veiled attempt to disqualify Hispanic and African American voters. Those groups tend to vote for Democratic candidates. And a victory of sorts for Detroit property owners. The judge overseeing Detroit's bankruptcy filing is allowing property owners to file tax appeals. This despite a stay preventing any legal action against the city while it's in bankruptcy court. However, the judge also ruled that property owners cannot collect on any decision for refunds without the court's approval. Well, sad news to report tonight for music fans. Grammy award-winning jazz keyboardist and producer George Duke has died. The 67-year-old Duke died last night in Los Angeles. He had been suffering from a form of leukemia. Duke earned Grammy Awards for his jazz production work with singer Diane Reeves in 2000 and 2001. The last of his 40 albums, Dreamweaver, was released just last month. He is survived by his 2 sons. The worst drought in a generation is impacting nearly 1 million Namibians, mostly women and children. Officials say more than 100,000 children are at risk of malnutrition and death. The president there has declared a national emergency after the failure of crops in May and earmarked $20 million of relief for the worst hit households. But the United Nations says that's not nearly enough.
We already know that Namibia is in a vulnerable situation in terms of nutrition, for example. 29% of children in this country are stunted, and stunting is irreversible.
Now, the UN says it needs at least $7.4 million to help just over 100,000 children from starving to death. If you're in the market for a new home, next on Soul of the South News.
The correlation between low mortgage rates and closing costs, and the states with the highest and lowest closing costs.
In your health and wellness news tonight, diapers are a necessity for babies, but providing them causes additional stress for low-income moms. A study published in the journal Pediatrics shows nearly 30% of women have some sort of diaper need for their children. 8% said they needed to stretch their diapers to make them last, meaning they're not changing diapers as often as they should. Reusing diapers and leaving them on too long can lead to more urinary tract infections and diaper rash. If you need help affording diapers, call your local hospital or doctor's office. They may have free samples available. Home buyers may have enjoyed record low mortgage rates over the past year, but they were paying a pretty penny when it came time to close. A survey by Bankrate.com found closing costs averaged about $2,400. That's up 6% from 2012. The estimates were based on a $200,000 mortgage for buyers with good credit and a 20% down payment. According to the survey, Hawaii has the highest closing costs. Buyers in Wisconsin paid the least. Well, starting August 18th, Apple will offer users of aftermarket iPhone, iPad, and iPod power adapters the chance to trade their old chargers in. They can then pick up a new genuine model at a discount. The program is being offered in response to safety issues related to counterfeit and third-party adapters. Ryan Seacrest has a new job to add to his resume. The Emmy Award-winning producer has been named to host NBC's Million-Second Quiz. Contestants play head-to-head trivia for 1 million seconds. That adds up to 11 days, 13 hours, 46 minutes, and 40 seconds. They'll be sitting in an hourglass-shaped structure in Midtown Manhattan. The new show is billed as a live interactive game show. It premieres September 9th. ABC's The Bachelor names its first non-white leading man. Former Bachelorette suitor Juan Pablo Galaviz will star in the next edition of the reality show. He is the first non-white bachelor or bachelorette in the show's history. Now, while there have been a handful of minorities as suitors, the show's producers have been accused of violating racial discrimination laws. The defendants pointed to the First Amendment as a bar against such claims, and a federal judge agreed and threw out the lawsuit.
Later this week on Soul of the South News, he is a man of detail and distinction. Each piece he creates takes us on a journey through history.
Black jockeys, frontiersmen, Buffalo Soldiers, Seminole Scouts, all the black women involved in the West.
Soul of the South News takes you inside the work of master sculptor Ed Dwight. Get an up-close look at his work and learn how his contributions will enrich the lives of future generations. Entrepreneur, comedian, actress. You probably remember Phyllis Stickney for her many roles in films from New Jack City to Jungle Fever.
Look at the brothers who are successful. Look at them. Most of the brothers who have made it got white women on their arms.
Soul of the South's Vicki Newton sat down with the multi-talented star who talks about her many projects and success stories.
Even today, I try to use entitlement instead of empowerment because we are entitled to these things.
I'm Roy Hobbs. Good night.